Close your eyes and let yourself drift into the mists of time, where the ancient Norse understood something profound about the nature of existence itself. In their world, nothing was permanent, not even the gods, not even the cosmos that held all things together in its mighty embrace. They knew that from the very moment of creation, the seeds of ending had already been planted, waiting patiently in the soil of destiny to bloom into something both terrible and beautiful. The Norse did not fear this ending, as we might expect, for they saw it not as a conclusion, but as part of an eternal rhythm, like the beating of a great cosmic heart that has pulsed since the beginning of all things. They called this ending Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, and in their telling of it, we find not despair, but a strange and comforting wisdom about the cycles that govern all existence. If you are seeking rest tonight, let this ancient story carry you gently towards sleep, for it is a tale that has soothed countless generations with its reminder that even in endings there is beauty, even in destruction there is hope for renewal. Like the winter that must come before spring can return, Ragnarok was seen not as death but as transformation, not as failure but as the natural order asserting itself over all things, even the mighty gods themselves. The story begins, as all great stories must, at the very foundation of what is in a cosmos born from the meeting of ice and fire, order and chaos, creation and destruction dancing together in an eternal embrace that would one day lead to the twilight we are about to explore together. In the beginning there was Ginnungagap, the great void, empty and waiting, like the silence between heartbeats or the pause between one breath and the next. To the north lay Niflheim, the realm of mist and ice, where cold winds howled through endless darkness, and to the south stretched Muspelheim, the land of fire and flame, where heat danced in waves that could melt stone and bend reality itself. When these two forces met in the emptiness of the void, their collision gave birth to the first being, Ymir, the primordial giant from whose body the world would eventually be carved by the gods who came after. But even in that first moment of creation, the Norse understood that the seeds of Ragnarok were already present, for in the very act of creation through destruction, in the necessity of killing Ymir to make the world, the pattern was established that would one day claim the gods themselves. They built their cosmos on the foundation of this truth, accepting that what they created would not last forever, that the beauty they brought into being carried within it the promise of its own twilight. The cosmos they built was not a simple place, but a complex web of interconnected realms, 9 worlds, held together by the great world tree, Yggdrasil, whose roots and branches stretched through all of existence. Like the nervous system of some vast living entity that dreamed all things into being and would one day dream them out of existence once more. The Norse cosmos, 9 realms in balance. Picture, if you will, a tree so vast that its branches hold worlds like fruit, so ancient that time itself seems young in comparison, so deeply rooted that its foundation touches the very essence of what it means to exist. This is Yggdrasil, the world tree, the axis around which all reality turns, the constant around which change dances in endless patterns of growth and decay. At the crown of this mighty tree sits Asgard, the shining realm of the gods, where golden halls catch the light of eternal fires and reflect it back in patterns too beautiful for mortal eyes to comprehend fully. Here dwells the Allfather Odin in his great hall, Valhalla, gathering the slain warriors who will one day fight in the final battle, and here to stands Gladsheim, the hall of the gods, where they meet in council, to discuss the fate of all the worlds, knowing even as they plan and scheme that their own fate is already written in the threads of destiny that the Norns weave beneath the roots of the tree. Below Asgard, connected by the rainbow bridge Bifrost that trembles with colors beyond naming, lies Midgard, the middle realm, the world of humans who go about their daily lives largely unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding around them. Midgard sits like a fortress in the center of the cosmic ocean, protected by the body of the serpent, Jormungandr, who encircles it, completely holding his own tail in his mouth in a symbol of cycles and eternity, waiting for the day when he will release that tail and rise from the depths to poison the very sky itself. To the east of Midgard stretches Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, those ancient beings who remember the time before the gods, who carry in their massive forms the wild chaos from which all order was carved. Their realm is one of towering mountains and deep valleys, of storms that rage for centuries and ice that never melts, a place where the old ways still hold sway and where the forces that will one day reclaim the ordered world gather their strength and bide their time with the patience that only immortal beings can truly possess. In the branches above, the realm of Alfheim glows with gentle light, home to the light elves, whose beauty is said to rival that of the gods themselves. Beings so pure and luminous that they seem to be made of starlight and morning dew. Their very presence a reminder that beauty exists in the cosmos, even as darkness gathers at its edges. Below the roots, in the depths where darkness pools like still water, lies Niflheim, the primordial realm of mist and ice from which all things originally came. A place of eternal winter and fog that swirls in patterns older than memory, where the well, Hvergelmir, bubbles with the waters from which all rivers flow, including those that will one day carry the tears of the gods when they realize that their twilight has truly begun. Deeper still lies Helheim, the realm of the dead, ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki, where those who die of sickness or old age rather than in glorious battle find their eternal rest. It is not a place of punishment, but simply a place of being where the dead continue their existence in a quieter, more subdued form, waiting perhaps for the day when even death itself will be transformed by the great changes that Ragnarok will bring to all the worlds. The realm of Vanaheim remains mysterious home to the Vanir gods, who joined with the Aesir after a great war that ended in wisdom rather than victory, teaching the lesson that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from conquest, but from the ability to recognize when former enemies should become family, a lesson that the gods would do well to remember in the dark times that are coming. Nidavellir, the realm of the dwarves, rings with the sound of hammers on anvils as these master craftsmen forge the weapons and tools that will play crucial roles in the events of Ragnarok. Their skill so great that they can create chains that will bind the unbindable and swords that will never dull their underground halls, filled with the glow of forge fires that reflect their dedication to the craft that gives meaning to their existence. Finally, there is Muspelheim, the realm of fire that existed before all others, where Surtr, the fire giant, sits with his flaming sword, waiting for the day when he will march forth to burn all the worlds in cleansing fire, not out of malice, but because it is his role in the great pattern, his part in the cosmic dance that will clear away the old to make room for the new. These 9 realms exist in delicate balance, each playing its part in maintaining the cosmic order. Yet, within this balance lie the tensions and contradictions that will eventually tear everything apart. For the Norse understood that no system, no matter how perfect it might seem, can remain stable forever when it contains within itself the very forces that created it, the gods and their fates. Among these cosmic realms move beings of such power and complexity that they seem to embody the very contradictions of existence itself. Gods who are simultaneously creators and destroyers, wise and foolish, noble and petty, reflecting in their divine natures all the struggles and paradoxes that define the mortal condition, only magnified to cosmic proportions that make their eventual fall all the more poignant and inevitable. Odin stands at the center of this divine family, the Allfather, whose wisdom was purchased with sacrifice, so profound that it echoes through all the stories told about him. He who hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights, pierced by his own spear, giving himself to himself, in a ritual of self-sacrifice that brought him the knowledge of the runes and the understanding of mysteries that even gods are not meant to know. His ravens Hugin and Munin thought and memory themselves given wingfly throughout all the worlds each day to bring him news of everything that transpires. Yet even with all this knowledge, even with his ability to see far into the future, he cannot change the fate that awaits him and all his kind. Odin knows that he will fall at Ragnarok, knows that the wolf Fenrir will devour him when the final battle comes. Yet he continues to prepare for that battle anyway, gathering the Einherjar, the honored dead, in Valhalla, where they feast and fight each day in preparation for a war that he knows they cannot ultimately win. There is something both tragic and beautiful in this knowledge, in the way he faces inevitable defeat with the same determination he once brought to creating the world, understanding that the true victory lies not in avoiding fate, but in meeting it with dignity and courage. Beside him stands Frigg, his wife, whose love for her son Balder will set in motion the very events that lead to Ragnarok, when her attempts to protect him from all harm inadvertently create the circumstances of his death. She who extracted oaths from all things in creation to do no harm to her beloved son, yet overlooked the humble mistletoe, thinking it too small and innocent to pose any threat, not understanding that in a cosmos built on balance, even the smallest oversight can have cosmic consequences. Thor, the Thunderer, moves through the worlds with his mighty hammer, Mjolnir, protector of gods and humans alike, his strength so great that giants flee at the sound of his approaching chariot. Yet even he, who has never known defeat in battle, will meet his match in the world serpent Jormungandr at Ragnarok. The prophecies tell that he will kill the serpent, but will take only 9 steps before falling dead from its poison. His victory and defeat coming in the same moment. A perfect embodiment of the Norse understanding that triumph and tragedy are often inseparable. The complexity of these divine relationships becomes most apparent in the figure of Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the one who exists at the boundary between order and chaos, belonging fully to neither yet essential to both. Blood brother to Odin, bound by oaths that go deeper than mere friendship, Loki serves as both helper and hindrance to the gods, his cleverness solving problems that his own mischief often creates in the first place. He is the catalyst without whom the static perfection of Asgard would become stagnation. Yet his very nature ensures that his interventions will eventually go too far, that the chaos he brings will eventually overwhelm the order he sometimes helps to maintain. The gods accepted Loki because they needed him, because absolute order without the possibility of change is just another form of death. Yet they could never fully trust him because his nature made him fundamentally unpredictable. This tension, this necessary but dangerous relationship, runs like a fault line through the foundation of Asgard, waiting for the right pressure to split everything apart. Baldur represents everything noble and beautiful in the divine realm, the god of light and purity, whose very presence makes the world brighter, whose dreams of his own death will herald the beginning of the end for all the gods. His brother, Hodr, blind and gentle, will become the unwitting instrument of his death, when Loki tricks him into throwing the mistletoe dart that will pierce Baldur's heart, showing how even the most innocent can become part of the tragic pattern when fate begins to assert itself. Frigg's other son, Vidar, is destined to survive Ragnarok, the silent god whose thick boot will crush the jaw of Fenrir after the wolf has devoured Odin, showing that even in destruction, the seeds of continuity are preserved. Vali, born for the sole purpose of avenging Baldur by killing Hodor, represents the way that violence breeds. Violence, how the attempt to balance the scales of justice can create imbalances that require further violence to correct, an endless cycle that can only be broken by the complete destruction and renewal that Ragnarok represents. The goddess Hel, daughter of Loki, rules over the realm of the dead with a wisdom beyond her years, her half-living, half-corpse appearance, a constant reminder that death and life are not opposites, but different aspects of the same underlying reality. She will play a crucial role in the events leading to Ragnarok when she refuses to release Baldur from death, unless all things in creation weep for him. And the failure of this condition, engineered by Loki in his final act of spite, ensures that the beloved god remains dead and that the twilight of the gods becomes inevitable. Each of these divine beings carries within their nature both the seeds of greatness and the flaws that will contribute to their eventual downfall. For the Norse understood that perfection is static and that only beings capable of growth and change, capable of making mistakes and learning from them, can create a cosmos dynamic enough to sustain life and meaning, even if that same dynamism ensures that nothing, not even the gods themselves, can last forever. The seeds of doom, signs of Ragnarok, the ending when it comes, does not arrive suddenly like a thunderclap in clear sky, but rather emerges slowly like winter creeping into autumn. So gradually that at first it seems like nothing more than the natural progression of seasons, until suddenly the world realizes that this winter will not end, that this darkness will not give way to spring, that the very foundations of existence have begun to shift in ways that cannot be undone. The first sign comes in the form of the Fimbulwinter, the great winter that will last for 3 full years without a single day of summer to break. Its grip a cold so profound that it penetrates not just the earth but the very hearts of gods and men, freezing compassion and kindness until only the hardest emotions remain. Snow falls continuously, winds howl without ceasing, and the sun grows pale and distant, as if it too is preparing to abandon a world that no longer deserves its warmth. During this terrible winter, brother will fight brother, fathers will turn against sons, and the bonds of kinship that once held society together will dissolve like ice in spring, except that no spring will come to renew what has been lost. The old codes of honor will be forgotten, the sacred oaths that once gave meaning to existence will be broken as easily as twigs in a storm, and chaos will begin to seep into the ordered world like water through cracks in a dam that grows weaker with each passing day. In the heavens above, even more ominous changes begin to manifest as the wolves Skoll and Hati, who have chased the sun and moon across the sky since the beginning of time, finally begin to close the distance to their prey. For countless ages, these cosmic hunters have pursued their quarry across the dome of heaven, their chase providing the rhythm of day and night, the cycle of seasons, the very heartbeat of time itself. But now their hunger grows so great that they begin to gain ground on the celestial bodies they have stalked for so long. Sol, the sun goddess, who has guided her bright chariot across the sky since the world began, starts to show signs of weariness as Skoll draws ever closer, his massive jaws snapping at her heels, his breath hot enough to dim her radiance. The days grow shorter, not just because of winter, but because her journey across the sky becomes increasingly frantic, increasingly desperate as she tries to outrun a fate that the prophecies have already sealed. Mani, the moon god, faces the same relentless pursuit from Hati, the wolf, whose name means hatred, and under this cosmic harassment, the moon begins to wane more deeply with each cycle, its light growing uncertain and flickering, casting shadows that seem to move independently of the objects that create them, as if darkness itself has begun to take on a life of its own and seeks to escape the boundaries that have contained it since the creation of the world. The very fabric of reality begins to show signs of whereas the cosmic order that the gods established through their sacrifice and wisdom starts to unravel thread by thread like an ancient tapestry exposed to winds that blow from places beyond the edge of existence. The carefully maintained balance between order and chaos, creation and destruction, begins to tip toward entropy as the forces that were once held in check by divine will and cosmic law begin to assert themselves with increasing boldness. Earthquakes shake the foundations of all the worlds as Loki, bound beneath the earth with poison dripping onto his face, writhes in agony and rage, his struggles sending tremors through the roots of Yggdrasil itself. The world tree, which has stood firm since the beginning of time, begins to tremble as its root system is disturbed by these cosmic convulsions, and in that trembling all the worlds, suspended in its branches, feel the first warnings of the catastrophe to come. The Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, that marvel of divine engineering that connects Asgard to the other realms, begins to show cracks in its perfect arc of color hairline fractures that spread slowly but inevitably, like age lines on a face that has seen too much sorrow. The gods who cross this bridge notice that its colors have begun to fade slightly, that the music it once made, when stepped upon, has become subtly discordant, as if even this most beautiful of divine creations cannot maintain its perfection in the face of the growing chaos. In Midgard, humans begin to lose their way as the social bonds that have held their communities together start to weaken under the pressure of the endless winter and the growing sense of cosmic dread that seeps into their dreams and waking thoughts alike. Wars break out over increasingly petty disputes. Families split apart over trivial disagreements that would once have been resolved with laughter and reconciliation. And the elderly begin to speak of dreams in which they see darkness covering the sun and hear the howling of wolves larger than mountains. The very animals begin to sense the approaching change as domestic beasts grow restless and wild creatures abandon their natural territories to flee toward the edges of the world, as if they understand instinctively that the center will not hold, that the safe spaces that have always existed will soon become dangerous, that the old sanctuaries will offer no protection against what is coming. Even the gods themselves begin to change as the pressure of approaching doom weighs upon their immortal consciousness. Their once bright laughter becoming forced and hollow, their council meetings growing longer and more contentious, as they argue about responses to threats that they know in their hearts cannot be stopped by any action they might take. Odin becomes even more obsessed with gathering knowledge and preparing for battle, while Thor ranges more widely through the worlds, as if trying to hold back the tide of chaos through the sheer force of his presence and the strength of his arm. The signs multiply like ripples spreading outward from a stone dropped into still water. Each small change creating further changes. Each crack in the cosmic order allowing chaos to seep a little deeper into the structured reality that the gods have built and maintained through their constant vigilance and sacrifice, until it becomes clear to all who have eyes to see that the twilight has indeed begun, and that no force in any of the 9 worlds can turn back the clock to the age of stability and light that is now passing away like a dream at dawn. The binding and breaking of Loki. The transformation of Loki from beloved trickster to agent of cosmic destruction unfolds like a tragedy written in the very stars themselves. Each step following inevitably from the last, each choice narrowing the possibilities until only one path remains, the path that leads through betrayal and punishment to the very heart of Ragnarok itself, where the bound god will finally break free to lead the forces of chaos against the order he once helped to create. For countless ages, Loki walked among the gods as brother and companion, his quick wit and shape-shifting abilities solving problems that strength alone could never address, his pranks and jokes providing the laughter that kept the divine community from becoming too rigid in its perfection. The gods needed him as much as they loved him, for without his unpredictable interventions, their ordered world would have become a static paradise, beautiful perhaps, but lifeless, lacking the dynamic tension that makes existence meaningful and growth possible. Yet within Loki's very nature lay the seeds of the tragedy that would eventually unfold. For he was never fully god nor fully giant, never completely belonging to order nor entirely of chaos, but existing always in the spaces between, the liminal being whose identity depended on crossing boundaries that others dared not approach. This in-between existence gave him his power but also his pain, for he could never rest fully in any one state of being, never find complete acceptance in any community, never silence the restless energy that drove him to constantly test the limits of what was possible and acceptable. The gods accepted him because they needed what he offered, but they could never fully embrace him because his nature made him fundamentally different from them. And this difference, this subtle but persistent otherness, began over time to fester like a wound that will not heal, creating resentment and bitterness that grew stronger with each passing age, until it transformed the beloved trickster into something darker and more dangerous. The moment of transformation came with the death of Baldur, the shining god, whose beauty and goodness had made all of creation brighter, whose prophetic dreams of his own death had filled the gods with such dread that Frigg had extracted oaths from all things to do no harm to her beloved son. Yet, in her thoroughness, she had overlooked the humble mistletoe, thinking it too small and innocent to pose any threat, not understanding that in a cosmos built on balance, even the smallest oversight can have cosmic consequences. Loki, driven by motives that even he might not have fully understood, feelings of exclusion and resentment that had built up over millennia of being the outsider, among the gods, transformed himself into an old woman, and discovered from Frigg herself the one thing that could harm her son. Then, with the cruelty that sometimes lurks in the heart of those who feel themselves unloved, he fashioned a dart from mistletoe and guided the hand of blind Hodder to throw it at his brother during what should have been harmless play. When the dart pierced Baldr's heart and the god of light fell dead, something fundamental changed in the relationship between Loki and the divine community that had been his home for so long. The gods' grief and rage at the loss of their most beloved member focused entirely on the one who had engineered his death, and their love for Loki, already strained by years of increasing mistrust, finally curdled into hatred and the desire for revenge. The final break came when Loki, perhaps realizing that his position among the gods had become untenable, appeared at their feast uninvited and proceeded to insult each deity present, revealing their secrets and failings with a vicious eloquence that cut deeper than any blade. This flighting, this ritual exchange of insults, became a purging of all the accumulated resentments and grievances that had built up between Loki and his divine family. But it also made his continued presence among them impossible. The gods pursued him across all the worlds as he fled in various shapes, sometimes as a salmon swimming upstream against the current of fate, sometimes as other forms that his shape-shifting nature allowed him to assume. But always eventually they found him, for even a god cannot run forever from the consequences of his choices, especially when those consequences involve the death of innocence and the breaking of bonds that were once sacred. When they finally caught him, the god's punishment was as cruel as it was creative, binding him with chains made from the entrails of his own son, Narfi, whom they had killed for the purpose, while his other son Vali was transformed into a wolf and driven to commit this fratricide in a frenzy of unnatural rage. Above Loki's bound form, they placed a serpent whose venom drips continuously onto his face, causing him such agony that his writhing shakes the very foundations of the world. Only his wife Sigyn remains with him in his torment, holding a bowl to catch the poison drops and spare him what pain she can. But when the bowl fills and she must turn away to empty it, the venom falls upon his face, and his screams of agony echo through all the worlds, creating earthquakes and storms that remind all of creation that the price of cosmic justice is sometimes cosmic suffering. Yet the gods, in their desire for revenge, may have made a fatal error, for the prophecies speak of Loki's eventual escape. When Ragnarok begins, and when he breaks free from his bonds, all the pain and hatred of his long imprisonment will have transformed him into something far more dangerous than the trickster who once walked among them as friend and brother. The bound god will rise as the leader of the giants and monsters, the one who will gather all the enemies of order to march against Asgard in the final battle. And in that transformation from beloved companion to cosmic enemy, we see the tragedy of how love can become hate, how justice can become vengeance, and how the very efforts to prevent a prophecy can be the actions that ensure its fulfillment. The serpent that drips poison on Loki's face may well be a symbol of time itself, each drop representing another moment of suffering that builds toward the moment of release, another increment of rage that will fuel the destruction to come. For in binding Loki, the gods may have bound themselves to the very fate they sought to avoid, creating through their punishment the enemy who will lead the forces that will destroy them all, the monsters of the end, Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel. From the union of Loki and the giantess Angrboda came 3 children whose very existence would challenge the gods' understanding of family, loyalty, and the nature of evil itself, for these offspring embodied not malice, but rather the raw power of nature itself, forces that could be beneficial or destructive, depending on how they were approached. Yet, the gods' fear of what they might become led to actions that ensured they would indeed become the enemies that the prophecies foretold. Fenrir, the wolf who would one day devour Odin himself, began life as a puppy in Asgard, raised among the gods who hoped that kindness and familiarity might change his destined nature. Only Tyr, the one-handed god of war and justice, was brave enough to feed the growing wolf, forming a bond of trust that would make his eventual betrayal all the more poignant when the time came to bind the creature they could no longer control through love alone. As Fenrir grew, his size and strength increased beyond anything the gods had expected, his intelligence shining in eyes that seemed to understand far more than any beast should. His presence, a constant reminder that some forces in the cosmos are too great to be domesticated, too wild to be contained by walls or treaties, or the hope that good intentions might overcome the momentum of fate. The gods' fear grew with the wolf's size, until they could no longer pretend that love and kindness would be enough to prevent the prophecy of their own destruction. And so they turned to trickery, claiming they wished to test various chains and bindings against Fenrir's strength in what they presented as games, contests that would prove his might to all who witnessed them. Twice the wolf allowed himself to be bound, and twice he broke free easily, his strength so great that the mightiest chains the gods possessed snapped like threads before his power. Finally, desperate and running out of options, the gods commissioned the dwarves to create Gleipnir, a binding that appeared to be nothing more than a silk ribbon, but was forged from impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the breath of a fish, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the spittle of a bird, and the beard of a woman, substances that existed in the spaces between reality, making the chain itself a thing of paradox and magic that could hold even what should be unholdable, sensed the trap in this seemingly innocent ribbon, and agreed to be bound by it only if one of the gods would place their hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith, a guarantee that this was indeed only a test and not an attempt at permanent imprisonment. Tyr, whose courage had led him to feed the wolf when others feared to approach, stepped forward and placed his hand between Fenrir's jaws, knowing full well what the cost would be when the wolf realized he had been betrayed. When Gleipnir proved unbreakable, and Fenrir realized that the gods had never intended to release him, his jaws snapped shut, severing Tyr's hand at the wrist, the gods' sacrifice becoming the symbol of the price that honor sometimes demands, the cost of keeping faith even when faith leads to loss. The reminder that some promises are kept, not because they are wise, but because they are necessary for the soul to remain intact. Bound on the island of Lyngvi, in the middle of the lake Amsvartner, Fenrir waits for Ragnarok with a patience that speaks of certainty rather than hope, for he knows that when the final battle comes, he will break free from his magical bonds to lead the wolves of the world in their assault on Asgard, and his first target will be Odin himself, the Allfather who sanctioned his binding, the god who chose fear over trust and reaped the consequences of that choice. Jormungandr, the world serpent, presented a different kind of challenge to the gods, for his size made it impossible to keep him in Asgard, yet dangerous to release him into the world. His nature as a serpent, marking him as a creature of wisdom and cunning, as well as strength. His destiny to encircle Midgard, making him both protector and threat to the world of humans who live unaware of his presence in the depths of the cosmic ocean. Odin's solution was to cast the serpent into the sea that surrounds Midgard, perhaps hoping that the vastness of the ocean would contain him, not foreseeing that Jormungandr would grow so large that he would eventually encircle the entire world, grasping his own tail in his mouth, in the ancient symbol of eternity and cycles, becoming both the boundary that defines Midgard and the force that will one day destroy it. In the depths of the ocean, Jormungandr waits with the patience of deep waters, his presence felt in every storm that churns the sea, every earthquake that shakes the ocean floor, every tide that rises higher than expected. For he is not merely a serpent, but a force of nature itself, the embodiment of the chaotic power that underlies all ordered existence, waiting for the day when he will release his tail and rise from the depths to poison the very sky with his breath. The prophecies tell that when Ragnarok comes, Jormungandr will emerge from the ocean in a torrent of water and venom that will flood the land and poison the air, his massive coils thrashing with such violence that the very foundations of Midgard will crack and crumble, his venom spreading so far that even the gods in Asgard will not be safe from its toxic influence, the very breath of chaos made manifest in physical form. Thor, the Thunderer, is destined to face the world's serpent in single combat during the final battle, their conflict representing the ultimate confrontation between order and chaos, structure and entropy, the force that builds and the force that tears down. Yet even in victory, Thor will take only 9 steps before falling dead from the serpent's poison, showing that some battles can be won only at the cost of everything the victor holds dear. Hel, the third of Loki's children, presents perhaps the most complex challenge to conventional understanding, for her dominion over death makes her neither enemy nor ally of the gods, but something more fundamental, the administrator of the final mystery that awaits all living things, the queen of the realm where all stories ultimately end. Yet her mixed nature, half living flesh and half corpse, reveals the truth that death and life are not opposites, but different aspects of the same underlying reality. The gods' decision to give her dominion over those who die of sickness or old age, rather than in battle, represents their recognition that death is not evil but natural. Yet their discomfort with her appearance and nature reveals their inability to fully accept the mortality that defines existence for all beings save themselves. Their desire to segregate death into a realm they do not have to visit or acknowledge in their daily lives. Hel rules her dark realm with a wisdom that comes from understanding both life and death intimately. Her judgments fair and her punishments appropriate. Yet when the gods need her cooperation to restore Baldur to life, her conditions reveal the complexity of her position in the cosmic order. For she demands that all things in creation weep for the dead god before she will release him, a test that reveals the hidden resentments and divisions that exist even among those who claim to love the shining god. When Loki, disguised as the giantess Thok, refuses to weep for Baldur, Hel's bargain fails, and the god remains dead, showing that even death herself cannot overturn the consequences of choices made in anger and spite. That some losses are permanent, not because death is cruel, but because the living are not united in their love, their grief, their willingness to put aside their differences for the sake of what they claim to value most. These three children of Loki represent different aspects of the natural forces that the gods sought to control through their ordered cosmos. Yet, in fearing these forces and attempting to bind or banish them, the gods ensured that when these powers finally asserted themselves, they would do so as enemies rather than as the neutral forces of nature. They might have remained the tragedy, being not that chaos exists, but that the attempt to eliminate it entirely created the very enmity that would eventually destroy the order the gods had worked so hard to create and maintain. The final battle, twilight of the gods. When the signs can no longer be ignored, and the fabric of reality has worn so thin that chaos bleeds through into the ordered world like ink spreading through water. When brother has turned against brother, and the bonds of kinship lie shattered like ice at winter's end. When the sun grows pale with fear, and the moon hides its face from what is coming. Then will the final chapter of the age begin to unfold with the inexorable certainty of sunrise. Yet this dawn will bring not light, but the deepest darkness the cosmos has ever known. The breaking of Loki's bonds sends shockwaves through all the worlds as the trickster god, transformed by eons of torment into something far more terrible than he ever was as a mischievous companion, rises from his place of punishment with a roar that shakes the very roots of Yggdrasil, his rage so great that it has become a force of nature itself, his hatred so pure that it cuts through the cosmic order, like a blade through silk, releasing all the carefully contained chaos that the gods have held in check since the creation of the world. From every corner of the cosmos, the enemies of order begin to gather, as if summoned by some cosmic horn that only the forces of destruction can hear. Giants emerging from their mountain strongholds, with weapons forged from storm and earthquake. Monsters rising from the depths of forgotten seas, with hunger sharp enough to devour worlds. The restless dead stirring in their graves as the barriers between life and death begin to weaken and blur, all drawn by the promise of an ending so complete that it will make room for an entirely new beginning. Surtr, the fire giant who has waited since before the creation of the world with his flaming sword across his knees, rises from his throne in Muspelheim and begins the march that will end in conflagration. His very footsteps leaving burning prints in the fabric of reality. His breath hot enough to melt the armor of gods. His sword bright enough to blind the sun itself as he leads his host of fire. Demons toward the final battle that will cleanse all the worlds in flame. Jormungandr releases his tail and begins to writhe in the cosmic ocean, his massive movements creating tidal waves that dwarf mountains, his venom-laden breath rising into the sky in clouds, so toxic that they poison the very air and turn the rain into acid that burns what it touches. His emergence from the depths causing such upheaval that the boundaries between sea and land begin to dissolve as water rushes in to reclaim territory that has been dry since the world began. Fenrir breaks free from Gleipnir with a howling that splits the sky, his jaws opening so wide that his lower jaw touches the earth, while his upper jaw scrapes the heavens. His breath, a wind cold enough to freeze the heart of summer. His eyes burning with the concentrated fury of all the years he spent bound and betrayed, leading a pack of wolves so vast that their running shakes the ground and their howling drowns out the thunder of Thor's hammer. From the realm of the dead comes Naglfar, the ship made from the fingernails of the deceased, its construction finally complete after eons of careful gathering. its hull gleaming with the pale light of grave fire, carrying a crew of dishonored dead under the command of Loki himself, who stands at its prow like a figure from nightmare, his face marked by the years of poison and pain, his laughter more terrible than any scream, as he guides his vessel across the flooded lands toward the final confrontation. The gods, seeing the fulfillment of all their darkest prophecies approaching like a storm front across the cosmic landscape, make their own preparations with the grim determination of those who know they face inevitable defeat, yet choose to meet it with weapons in their hands and courage in their hearts. For they understand that how one faces the end matters more than whether one survives it, that dignity in defeat can be its own kind of victory. Odin leads his Einherjar from Valhalla, the chosen slain, who have spent their deaths preparing for this moment, their weapons shining with the light of battles fought in the afterlife, their skills honed by daily combat in the Allfather's hall. Yet even these greatest of warriors march toward Vigrid, the final battlefield, with the knowledge that their sacrifice will buy not victory but only the right to face destruction with honor intact. The Rainbow Bridge, Bifrost, finally collapses under the weight of the marching armies, its beautiful arc of color fragmenting into shards of light that fall like tears across all the realms. The connection between the realms severed just as the need for unity becomes most desperate, leaving each world to face the final darkness alone, isolated by the very destruction that makes their cooperation most necessary. On the plain of Vigrid, the armies meet in a collision that sends shockwaves through the foundation of existence itself. Gods and giants locked in combat that has been building since the first moment of creation, when order carved itself out of primordial chaos and began the long struggle that could only end in mutual annihilation. Each side fighting not for conquest but for the right to determine what shape the destruction will take. Odin faces Fenrir in single combat, the Allfather's spear, Gungnir, meeting the wolf's terrible jaws in a clash that echoes through all the worlds. Yet, for all his wisdom and preparation, for all his sacrifices and knowledge, Odin cannot escape the fate that he has foreseen, and Fenrir's jaws close around him in fulfillment of the prophecy that has haunted his dreams since the wolf was first brought to Asgard as a puppy. Thor battles Jormungandr, with hammer and lightning, their conflict so violent that it cracks the very foundations of Midgard. The thunder god's strength finally meeting an opponent worthy of his might. Yet even as his hammer crushes the serpent's skull and ends its threat to the cosmos, the world, serpent's dying breath envelops him in a cloud of venom so potent that the god of thunder takes only 9 steps before falling dead, his victory and defeat coming in the same moment. Tyr, the one-handed god of war, faces Garm, the hound of hell, in a battle that represents the ultimate confrontation between order and entropy, justice and chaos. Yet both warriors are so evenly matched that they kill each other simultaneously, their mutual destruction symbolizing the way that opposing forces can be so perfectly balanced that their conflict can only end in the annihilation of both. Heimdall, guardian of the Rainbow Bridge, meets Loki in single combat, the watchman of the gods facing the traitor who was once his friend. Their battle a personal conflict wrapped within the cosmic struggle. Old grievances and broken bonds finding their resolution in violence that leaves both combatants dead. Their feud finally settled in the only way it could be, through mutual destruction that ends their conflict by ending them both. As the battles rage and the gods fall one by one, Surtr strides across the battlefield with his flaming sword raised high. His purpose not to join the combat, but to fulfill his role as the bringer of the final ending. The one whose fire will cleanse all the worlds and make room for what is to come, his flames consuming not just the dead and dying, but the very substance of reality itself, burning away the cosmos as it has existed since the beginning of time. The fire spreads from world to world, racing along the branches of Yggdrasil like some cosmic wildfire, consuming Asgard and Midgard, Alfheim and Vanaheim, even reaching into the depths to burn Niflheim and Helheim. The flames so hot that they turn stone to vapor and metal to mist, leaving behind not ash but emptiness, not destruction, but a return to the void from which all things originally came. Yet, even as the fire consumes everything that has ever been, even as the world tree itself begins to burn and the cosmic order dissolves back into the chaos from which it was born, there is in this ending not despair, but a strange kind of peace, for the Norse understood that destruction and creation are not opposites, but partners in an eternal dance, that the fire that burns away the old makes room for the new, that Ragnarok is not the end of all things, but the end of one chapter in an endless story, whose next page is already waiting to be written. Ashes and renewal, a new world emerges. In the aftermath of fire, when the last echoes of battle have faded into silence and the cosmic flames have burned themselves out, leaving behind not ash, but a profound stillness that seems to hold within it the potential for anything to emerge. The void waits as it once waited before, pregnant with possibilities that have not yet chosen their form, ready to birth a new cosmos from the fertile darkness of ending. From the waters that have covered all the burning worlds, a new earth begins to rise, green and fresh and unmarked by the struggles that consumed the old its mountains, lifting themselves from the depths with the slow majesty of creation itself, its valleys filling with sweet water that carries no memory of the poison that once tainted the cosmic ocean, its forests growing in patterns that echo the old but express themselves in forms that are entirely new. This new world is not a copy of what came before, but a transformation, taking the best of what existed and leaving behind the contradictions and tensions that made the old cosmos ultimately unstable. The lessons learned through destruction now woven into the very foundation of what is being born, ensuring that this new creation will be both familiar and wonderfully strange. Baldur returns from the realm of the dead, his light undimmed by his sojourn in Hel's dark kingdom, his beauty enhanced rather than diminished by his journey through death and back to life, his presence a promise that what is truly good cannot be permanently destroyed, but only temporarily obscured, waiting for the right moment to emerge again in forms that are both recognizable and renewed. With him comes his brother Hodger, no longer blind and no longer burdened by the guilt of his unwitting role in Baldur's death. The curse that made him the instrument of tragedy lifted along with all the other sorrows that weighed down the old world, his sight restored along with his joy, his relationship with his brother healed by their shared experience of loss and recovery. Vidar and Vali, the sons of Odin, who survived the final battle, stand as bridges between the old world and the new, carrying forward the wisdom their father gained through sacrifice, while leaving behind the obsessions and fears that ultimately contributed to his downfall. Their presence ensuring that the new cosmos will not be built in ignorance of what came before, but in full knowledge of both its triumphs and its failures. Thor's sons, Modi and Magni, inherit their father's strength, but not his burden, taking up his hammer, Mjolnir, in a world where its power can be used for creation rather than constant defense against the forces of chaos. Their inheritance, a reminder that the best qualities of the gods survive their individual deaths, transformed and renewed in the generation that follows. Fenrir, who survived the fire through his gift of prophecy and his understanding of time's deeper patterns, brings with him the knowledge of what was and the wisdom to help shape what will be. His presence, a guarantee that the new world will not repeat the mistakes of the old, but will find new ways to express the eternal truths that underlie all existence. In this new cosmos, the survivors do not build cities in the sky, but dwell on the green earth itself, their halls open to the winds and rain, their lives lived in harmony with the natural cycles rather than in defiance of them. Having learned through the experience of ending that the attempt to separate the divine from the natural, order from chaos, creation from destruction, leads ultimately to the very catastrophe it seeks to avoid. The new world tree that grows to replace Yggdrasil is both the same and different, its roots reaching deeper into the earth and its branches spreading wider across the sky, but its growth guided by the understanding that true strength comes not from rigid resistance to change, but from the ability to bend with the forces of transformation while maintaining essential integrity, to grow and adapt while preserving core identity. In the bright halls of this new earth, the surviving gods gather not to plan wars against chaos, but to celebrate the marriage of opposites that creates the dynamic tension necessary for life and growth. Understanding finally that what they once saw as enemies were actually partners in the cosmic dance, that creation and destruction, order and chaos, life and death are not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of a greater harmony that encompasses all possibilities. To humans, Leaf and Liftthracer, whose names mean life and eager for life, emerge from the shelter where they hid during the burning, having sustained themselves on the morning dew while the world ended around them. Their survival, a testament to the persistence of hope and the resilience of life itself, their presence ensuring that the new world will not be populated only by gods but by beings who understand mortality and through that understanding give meaning to eternity. These first humans of the new age are not burdened by the sins and sorrows of their predecessors, but begin their lives in a world where the barriers between divine and mortal, sacred and mundane, have been softened by the shared experience of ending and renewal. Their children destined to grow up in a cosmos where cooperation replaces conflict, where wisdom is valued over power, where the cycle of seasons includes destruction not as failure but as necessary preparation for growth. The sun, reborn from the ashes of the old, shines with a light that is both familiar and new, guided by Sol's daughter, who learned from her mother's fate the importance of maintaining distance from those who would devour beauty out of hunger they cannot satisfy. Her path across the sky, a symbol of continuity within change, persistence within transformation, reflections beneath Yggdrasil. As our journey through the twilight of the gods draws to its close, and the new world settles into the rhythm of its own existence, we find ourselves once again beneath the world tree. But now it is both the same tree that witnessed the destruction of the old cosmos and a new tree that has grown from the seeds of wisdom scattered by that destruction. Its shade offering not just shelter, but the deeper comfort that comes from understanding that nothing truly ends. Everything only transforms. In the gentle rustling of its leaves, we hear the echo of all the stories that have been told and retold around fires, both ancient and eternal. The reminder that myths are not simply tales of gods and monsters, but reflections of the deepest truths about existence itself. Mirrors in which we can see our own struggles with mortality and meaning, growth and loss, the persistent hope that somehow, even in ending, there is beginning. The Norse who first told these stories understood something that modern minds sometimes forget in their pursuit of permanence and security. That change is not the enemy of meaning, but its very foundation. That the fear of endings prevents us from fully experiencing beginnings. That the acceptance of mortality gives depth and poignancy to every moment of life that we might otherwise take for granted. Ragnarok teaches us that even the gods, with all their power and wisdom, could not escape the consequences of their choices, could not build a perfect world that would last forever, could not avoid the twilight that comes to all things. Yet in their acceptance of this fate and their willingness to face it with courage and dignity, they achieved a kind of immortality that no amount of divine power could have granted them. In the end, perhaps that is the most important lesson that emerges from the ashes of the old world and the hope of the new. That what matters is not whether we can avoid endings, but how we meet them. Not whether we can build something that will last forever, but whether we can build something beautiful enough to make the inevitable ending worthwhile. Not whether we can escape the cycles of growth and decay, but whether we can find our place within them and dance to their rhythm with grace and joy. The world tree stands eternal, not because it never changes, but because it adapts to every season, grows stronger through every storm, reaches deeper into the earth and higher into the sky with each passing age. Its constancy lying not in static perfection, but in dynamic resilience. Its immortality achieved not through the pre-voidance of death, but through the endless renewal that makes death merely another form of transformation. As you drift toward your own rest, carried gently by the rhythm of this ancient story that has soothed countless generations, with its reminder that every ending is also a beginning. Every twilight the promise of a new dawn, every winter the necessary preparation for spring's return. Let yourself be comforted by the knowledge that you too are part of these great cycles. That your own small story is woven into the larger tapestry of existence in ways that make even the briefest life meaningful and eternal. The gods sleep now in the new world they helped to birth through their sacrifice. Their dreams peaceful with the knowledge that their ending made possible a beginning more beautiful than anything they could have imagined. Their twilight transformed into the dawn of something better. Their story a lullaby that will continue to comfort those who seek to understand the mystery of existence, as long as there are humans to wonder at the stars and tell tales beneath the endless sky. And beneath Yggdrasil, the world tree that has witnessed the death and birth of cosmos, that has sheltered gods and humans, giants and dwarves, the wise and the foolish, the stories continue. The leaves whisper their ancient wisdom. The roots draw strength from the soil of memory, and the branches reach always toward whatever light there is to find, patient and eternal, constant in change, immortal in transformation, teaching by example the deepest truth of all, that everything passes, everything changes, everything dies, and everything is reborn. World without end. Story without ending. beneath the tree that dreams all things into being and dreams them gently back to sleep.